Hi, I'm Jim Frederick. I'm a elder here at the Lacey Creek Church of Christ, and I do the sermons on the fifth Sundays, and so this is my turn to give the lesson. Been interested in preaching in the 12 minor prophets, and I started on my last lesson with Obadiah, and I intend to go through the minor prophets, starting with the earliest, which is believed to be Obadiah and Joel, and working my way through all the 12 prophecies. The first one that I did on my last sermon was Obadiah, and I'd like to review that just a moment, and we'll go on into Joel. Today my lesson is going to be on the prophecy of Joel. And Obadiah was a very short book, only had one chapter, and God had spoken to Obadiah and used Obadiah to criticize Edom, Edom being the descendants of Esau. And what had happened is Israel had been just ravaged by an enemy, one or more enemies, and the Edomites had come in and ransacked the ruins and taken the refugees and killed some and sold some into slavery, and was very cruel to their relatives, the Israelites. And God sent the message to Obadiah that Edom would cease to exist because of what they'd done to his people. He also warned them that they were intelligent people and at one time very powerful people. They were known for their mountains. Edom was a mountainous area, and they had their mountain fortresses, and they relied on those, and they were very wise people. And Teman was one of the major cities of Edom, and it was known for its wise men. And the Edomites had depended on that. And the Edomites had thought they were very clever, and they had made alliances with other nations and felt secure in that. But God told them in that short prophecy not to depend on those things, that was going to fail them, and sure enough, it did. And two interesting people that come to mind when we think of Edom. Teman was a city in southern Edom known for its wise men, and that city is where Eliphaz come from, one of Job's friends that traveled to visit with Job when he was suffering. And another interesting character that came out of that line of people was Herod the Great. And the way that came about is Edom ceased to exist, but it merged into another country, the Idumea, and Herod the Great was from Idumea. He was an Edomite. I think that's the way you'd say that. But he all the Herods were of that lineage. But the one thing where we really learned the most is in Obadiah. Let's see, verses 15 and 17, which God was telling us that the day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. Just as you drank on my holy hill, so all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and be as if they had never been. But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and the house of Jacob will possess its inheritance. The day of the Lord comes through as in Joel. The day of the Lord is mentioned 5 times in Joel, which is also a very short prophecy and only 3 chapters. But it's very, 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 very instructive in its deliverance. It's very you learn a lot by studying Joel, and I certainly hope all those listening will do that and read it. It's very, and you always learn. I did. I read it many times going through these studies, and each time I learned a little more. Now Joel, the prophet, lived. They think around about 830. He prophesied and lived around 830 BC, and he preached to Judah and Jerusalem. And that's just one thing I say a lot, that it's hard to find 2 doctors agree on anything, and I think it's hard to find historians to agree too. But the best be determined that was the period of Joel. We don't know hardly anything about him except that his father was named Bethuel, and we don't know anything about him. So we don't know much about the prophet, but we do know that God chose him to be his speaker to his people, to be his representative, or his voice box to the people of Judah and Jerusalem. And we know that, as all prophets are, what they say to those people in those days, though it be 830 BC and to a different people, it's fitting for today. We can learn for our learning today. In Joel speaks of a great plague of locusts. And it's believed that that's what he really preached on, that the land was devastated by a plague of locusts. After the locusts came fire and other forces that God intended to visit on his people. He called this plague of locusts his army. He led this army. He claimed them, and throughout Joel, the day of the Lord is mentioned 5 times. This was the major thrust of Joel, is the coming day of the Lord. And what God was doing with the plague of locusts, the plague of fires, the plague of drought, was to use those as a whipping stick to have them realize that there will be a day of reckoning, that there will be a day of the Lord. Joel leads us through a time of this devastation, of what how severe it is, but how much worse it could be. I'm going to start reading in Obadiah 1 and 1 through 6. Joel 1 through 6. The word of the Lord that came to Joel, son of Bethuel. Hear this, you elders. Listen, all who live in the land. Has anything like this ever happened in your days, or in the days of your forefathers? Tell it to your children, and let your children tell it to their children, and their children to the next generation. What the locust swarm has left, the great locusts have eaten. And what the great locusts have left, the young locusts have eaten. And what the young locusts have left, other locusts have eaten. Wake up, you drunkards, and weep. Wail, all you drinkers of wine. Wail because of the new wine, which is grape juice, for it has snatched from your lips. A nation has invaded my land, powerful, without number. It has the teeth of a lion and the fangs of a lioness. Remember, God's the head of this army. It's His intention to speak to His people. While I was beginning to read these words, I kind of reflected on what we're going through right now. A month ago, we'd have never dreamed that we'd have been in such a condition as we are. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's a real medical threat to us all. It's absolutely devastated us financially, and we would have never thought that. And this is the same as happening here. Is these people all of a sudden out of a swarm of locusts? They're attacked, and everything is taken away. Every way they had to produce food, every building was crawling with these things. So just as they were affected by that plague of locusts, we're affected. So I think we can learn that through this lesson here, that how we can approach this new trouble, this new problem. In Joel 1:13 through 15, Joel writes, "Put on sackcloth, O priests, and mourn. Wail, you minister, before the altar. Come, spend the night in sackcloth, you who minister before my God. For the grain offerings and drink offerings are withheld from the house of your God. Declare a holy fast, call a sacred assembly. Summon the elders and all who live in the land to the house of the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord. Alas for that day, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty." What had happened is Judah, or the Israelites, had become, this is the best word that I could find in my readings, become self-indulgent. They become centered on themselves. They were partying, having fun, not taking time for God, not taking. They lost their spirituality, and they're actually apparently they lost their love for the Lord. So God was using these tools, this epidemic of the locusts, of the drought, of the fires, to get them back into knowledge and to the right direction, and to tell them that there is a day coming when all this will be reckoned. I wonder about our situation. We don't have any difficulty filling our stadiums with tens of thousands of people, or our auditoriums with tens of thousands of people. But I wonder about our churches. And I got to reflecting, just something in my memory is in days gone by that I'd see there would be stadiums full of people coming to listen to a minister. And then there would be, after that, a time for those people, if they wanted to be prayed for, or if they wanted to go down and be renewed or whatever, there'd be hordes of people coming down. I remember at one day at Harding University, they were having a revival there. And my brother-in-law, Jim Gallion, and I were standing outside the auditorium, and I believe the auditorium would hold, I think, around 5,000 people. That may be just an off-the-wall number, but I believe that's correct. And Jim and I were standing there, and I told Jim, I said, we better go on in. I mean, it looks like it's getting, pretty full. We hadn't looked in, but the hordes of people were coming in. Oh, no problem. Well, for long, we had a hard time finding 2 seats. So I'm sure that God would like to see America do that from coast to coast, to have a revival and have it turned around, that where it's hard to fill our congregate churches, have us fill up the stadiums and the auditoriums with people they've got a change of mind to come back to God. In 2nd chapter of Joel, verses 1 and 2, blow the trumpet in Zion, sound the alarm on my holy hill. Let all who live in the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is close at hand, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, like dawn spreading across the mountains. A large and mighty army comes, such as never was of old, nor ever will be in ages to come. And in 2 and 10 through 17, before them the earth shakes, the sky trembles, the sun and moon are darkened, and the stars no longer shine. The Lord thunders at the head of his army. His forces are beyond number, and mighty are those who obey his command. The day of the Lord is great. It is dreadful. Who can endure it? And then Joel tells us who can endure this. In verses 12, chapter 2, verses 12 through 17. Yeah. Even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. Rend your heart, not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, and he relents from sin and calamity. Who knows, he may turn and have pity, and leave behind a blessing, grain offerings and drink offerings for the Lord your God. Blow the trumpet in Zion, declare a holy fast, call a sacred assembly, gather the people, consecrate the assembly, bring together the elders, gather the children, those nursing at the breast. Let the bridegroom leave his room, let the bride her chamber. Let the priests who minister before the Lord weep between the temple porch and the altar. Let them say, spare your people, O Lord. Do not make your inheritance an object of scorn, a byword among the nations. Why should they say among the peoples, where is their God? Starting in answer to that question, Joel has another answer, the Lord's answer. In verse 18 and 18 through 19, then the Lord will be jealous of his land, take pity on his people. The Lord will reply to them, I am sending you grain, new wine and oil, enough to satisfy you fully. Never again will I make you an object of scorn to the nations. I will drive the northern army far from you, pushing it into a parched and barren land, with its front columns going into the eastern sea, and those in the rear into the western sea, and its stench will go up, its smell will rise. Surely he has done great things. In verse in 2:25 through 27, I will repay you. So if those people repent, if his nation repents and changes their way, he'll deliver them. That's what he's saying, and that's what he's trying to avoid, is that they won't witness the great day of the Lord. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten, the great locust and the young locust, the other locust and the locust swarm, my great army that I sent among you. You will have plenty to eat until you are full. You will praise the name of the Lord your God, who has worked wonders for you. Never again will my people be shamed. Then you will know that I am in Israel, that I am the Lord your God, and there is no other. Never again will my people be shamed. So, by repenting, those people have pleased the Lord, and he's relented, and he's going to save those people. The verses from 28 through 32 is a foretelling of the Holy Spirit. These verses are quoted in Peter at the day of Pentecost, and it's in Acts 2:16 through 21. And afterward, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my Spirit in those days. I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be deliverance, as the Lord has said, among the survivors whom the Lord calls. So this is one of the, I guess, the great part of Joel is that it is part of the New Testament revelation in the foretelling of the Holy Spirit, as Peter delivered on the day of Pentecost. The third chapter of Joel deals with the judgment of the nations. In 3:1 through 2, in those days, at that time, when I restore the fortune of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. There I will enter into judgment against them, concerning my inheritance, my people Israel. For they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land. They cast lots for my people and traded boys for prostitutes, and they sold girls for wine that they might drink. Excuse me. In 3:14 through 16, multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and moon will be darkened, and the stars no longer shine. The door will roar from Zion and thunder from Jerusalem. The earth and the sky will tremble. But the Lord will be a refuge for his people, a stronghold for the people of Israel. So certainly we can learn a great deal from Joel. It's a great prophecy. And of course, that's, as we said earlier, the prophet just spoke what God wanted him to speak. He's the spokesperson for God himself. So that's my study on Joel, and like I say, I'm going to try to work through all the rest of the minor prophets. Want to say, well, this is kind of an unusual forum. We're just Tom and I are here, and but we want to let you know that if there's anyone out there in need, or if there's anyone out there that's decided to give their life over to Christ, or any of those things, they just need to contact us, and we'll certainly come. All right, yeah.